The day my stepbrother stood up in that boardroom and told 14 people I had agreed to sign away my share of my mother's business, I didn't say a word. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked at the grain of the table. I counted the water rings someone had left on the wood near the end. 3 of them, overlapping, like a bad Venn diagram. And I thought, not yet. He expected me to cry, or yell, or at the very least go pale. I didn't give him any of it. My mother built Callaway Fine Interiors from a spare bedroom in Kitchener, Ontario. She started in the late 90s with a catalog printer, a second-hand camera, and a gift for knowing exactly what a room was missing. By the time I was in elementary school, she had 4 employees. By the time I was in high school, she had 22. By the time she got sick, the company had offices in Kitchener, Hamilton, and a satellite space in Calgary, and it was worth, according to the valuation done the year before her diagnosis, just over $4 million. She built it alone. My father left when I was 3. It was always just the 2 of us, and then later, when I was 9, my stepfather came into the picture, and with him, his son. His son was 31 when my mother died. I was 28. His name was Barrett. I want to be careful about how I describe Barrett, because the truth is, he wasn't obviously terrible. He was handsome in a way that photographs well. He was charming at family dinners. He called my mother Mum within a year of my stepfather marrying her, which she liked, though I always thought it came too easy. He worked in commercial real estate in Waterloo. He drove a Lexus. He had a girlfriend named Priya who I actually liked quite a bit, and who, I would later learn, he had been cheating on for most of their relationship. My stepfather, Gerald, was a decent man who loved my mother genuinely. I believe that. He was also conflict-averse, in a way that made him easy to manipulate, and Barrett had been doing it his whole life. My mother's will was clear. Callaway Fine Interiors would be split. 60% to me, 40% to Gerald. Barrett received nothing from the estate directly, because my mother was thorough. She had a lawyer she trusted. She had a plan. What she didn't plan for was Barrett. She died on a Tuesday in February. The kind of February day that feels like the sky itself has given up. Gray and flat, and so cold the snow doesn't even squeak under your boots anymore. It just compresses into silence. I drove to the hospital from my apartment in Guelph and I held her hand for the last 40 minutes. And when it was over, I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time before I could make myself drive home. The grief was its own country. I didn't leave it for weeks. Barrett was at the funeral. He cried, which surprised me. Or maybe it didn't surprise me. Maybe I just didn't have the bandwidth to process what was real and what wasn't. He started calling Gerald more after that. Checking in, he said. Making sure his dad was okay. Gerald told me about these calls with something close to gratitude. The first sign came 6 weeks after the funeral. I was at the Kitchener office, going through my mother's files, trying to understand the operational side of the business I now partially owned, when her assistant, a woman named Ogechi, who had been with the company for 8 years, and who I will be grateful to for the rest of my life, pulled me aside and told me she'd received an unusual request. Someone had asked her to pull the original incorporation documents and the shareholder agreement and scan them to an external email address. The request had come from my account. I had not made it. I looked at the email. It had been sent from my address at 11:47 on a Wednesday night, 3 weeks after my mother died. I had been in Guelph that night. I had been asleep by 10. I checked my sent folder. Nothing. Whoever sent it had sent it and then deleted it, and would have gotten away clean if Ogechi hadn't flagged it as unusual, and held off on complying until she could confirm with me directly. I thanked her. I told her I needed to think. I went home and I sat at my kitchen table and I thought for a long time. Then I called my IT contact at the company, and asked him to pull every login to my work account for the past 2 months. I did not tell Barrett. I did not tell Gerald. I did not tell anyone. I just started watching. I should tell you what I do for work, because it matters. I'm a forensic accountant. I work for a mid-sized firm in Guelph that handles financial investigations, fraud cases, estate disputes, insurance claims. I have a CPA designation and a CFE, which stands for Certified Fraud Examiner. I have spent 5 years of my career helping lawyers and courts understand exactly how people hide money, move money, and make paper trails disappear. Barrett did not know this. Or rather, he knew my job title, but I don't think he understood what it meant. People hear accountant and they think spreadsheets. They don't think investigator. They don't think someone who does this for a living. That was his mistake. Over the next 3 months, while Barrett made his plans and I showed up to every meeting and said very little, and let him think I was still submerged in grief, and easily managed, I was building a file. The unauthorized login to my work account had come from an IP address registered to a cafe in Waterloo, 4 minutes from Barrett's condo. He had apparently accessed my account using a password I'd used years ago on a shared family laptop. A password I hadn't changed when I set up the work account. My own oversight. I noted it and moved on. The shareholder agreement he'd tried to pull was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, I found evidence he had contacted my mother's original corporate lawyer, a man named Mr. Esposito who had since retired, pretending to be inquiring on behalf of the family about updating the estate records. Mr. Esposito's former assistant, who now worked at a different firm, confirmed the call when I reached her through a professional contact. I found evidence he had been in contact with a notary public in Cambridge, a man named Fortier, regarding the preparation of a document. I didn't know what the document was yet, but I had the name, and I kept going. The financial picture that emerged over those months was this: Barrett had debts. Significant ones: a failed investment in a commercial property development in Brantford, a line of credit he'd maxed twice, he was behind on his own condo fees. The Lexus was leased, not owned. The picture he projected: successful, comfortable, going places, was a construction that cost more to maintain every year. And here was a company worth $4 million. 40% of which was owned by his elderly, grieving, conflict-averse father. I understood then what the plan probably was. Get Gerald to transfer or assign his stake to Barrett. Or better yet, manufacture documentation suggesting Gerald had already done so, or that I had agreed to something I hadn't agreed to. Use the grieving family period, when records are messy and attention is scattered, to create a paper reality that didn't reflect the actual one. I kept watching. I kept compiling. And I kept showing up to family dinners and saying very little, while Barrett told Gerald what a smart idea it would be to consolidate the ownership structure of Mum's company and maybe bring in a fresh perspective. Gerald told me about these conversations because he told me everything. He wasn't hiding anything. He genuinely didn't understand what was being proposed. And I couldn't explain it to him yet without showing my hand. What I could do was stall. Every time Gerald mentioned Barrett's suggestions, I said, "That sounds interesting. I'd want to look at it properly. Can we give it a few more months? I'm still getting my head around operations." Barrett interpreted this as me being overwhelmed and passive. He pushed Gerald harder. Gerald, to his credit, said, "Let's wait until she's ready." Barrett, to his eventual cost, kept building his case anyway. The document appeared in month 4. It was delivered to Calloway Vey Fine Interior's registered address. A formal-looking letter on a notary's letterhead, from Fortier in Cambridge, stating that it had come to his attention that an agreement had been executed between the shareholders, and that a copy was available upon request. I requested it. What arrived was a 2-page document, signed, apparently, by me, dated 5 weeks after my mother's death, agreeing to transfer my 30% stake in Calloway Fine Interiors to a numbered company. The signature looked enough like mine to be plausible. The date fell within the window when I had been at my most isolated, barely leaving my apartment, which Barrett would have been able to infer. The numbered company, when I traced it, was registered to a holding structure in Ontario. It took me 11 days to find Barrett's name attached to it, through a director listing on a subsidiary. I held that piece of paper for a long time. Then I made 3 calls. One to my own lawyer, a woman in Guelph named Ms. Oduya, who is sharp and does not rattle. One to a digital forensic specialist I'd worked with on a fraud case the year before. One to the Ontario Securities and Professional Conduct body that handles complaints against notaries. And then I waited for the meeting Barrett had been pushing Gerald to schedule. The one where we would all sit down to clarify the company's future direction. The one he'd finally convinced Gerald to book at a boardroom in a hotel in Kitchener. I showed up 12 minutes early. I sat at the far end of the table. I brought a folder. There were 14 people in that room. Gerald, Barrett, Barrett's own lawyer, a man from Waterloo who looked at me with a kind of practiced, professional pity that I recognized immediately as a negotiating posture. 2 of my mother's senior employees who Barrett had somehow convinced should be present to hear the transition plan. An accountant I didn't recognize. And various other people Barrett had assembled, I think, for the same reason anyone stacks a room, to make the other person feel outnumbered. I was the only one there without a support team. I had not brought anyone. Barrett opened by thanking everyone for coming. He talked about my mother, genuinely I thought, with something that might have been real grief underneath the performance. He talked about her legacy. He talked about his hopes for the company. Then he said that he understood there had been some confusion about the ownership structure, and that he wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page, and that in fact a document existed. He slid a copy across the table toward me, confirming my prior agreement to transition my stake during the estate settlement period. He looked at me then, not unkindly, almost gently. "I know this has been a hard few months," he said. "I just want to make sure we're all moving forward together." I looked at the document. I looked at my signature on it. I said, "Can I ask a question?" He said, "Of course." "What was the weather like in Guelph on the date this was signed?" He blinked. "I'm sorry? February 22nd, I said. "The date on this document. What was the weather like?" He looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked at him. "I'm not sure what that has to do with, I said. "Because on February 22nd, there was a significant ice storm across Waterloo region in Wellington County. Highway 7 was closed between Kitchener and Guelph for most of the afternoon. You might remember it. It was on the news." I opened my folder. The reason I ask is that this document was apparently notarized in Cambridge at 2:15 in the afternoon on that date. And I have here a time-stamped photograph, taken from my phone and auto-uploaded to my cloud storage, showing me at my apartment in Guelph at 2:09 p.m. that same day. I placed it on the table, along with a Bell Canada cell tower log confirming my phone, and therefore, most likely me, was in Guelph at that time, not Cambridge. The room was quiet. I also have, I continued, a report from a digital forensic specialist who examined the metadata on this document's electronic file, which Mr. Fortier's office, I should mention, provided to me directly when I requested it. The document was created in a file format that embeds editing history. The last save was made from a device whose registered identifier matches a laptop purchased in Waterloo in 2021. I slid that report across the table. I have the purchase record here as well. Barrett's lawyer said something. I didn't hear what it was. Gerald was looking at Barrett. I should also let everyone know, I said, that I've already filed a formal complaint with the Law Society regarding the notary, and that I've spoken with an RCMP financial crimes contact who a colleague referred me to. Forgery of a legal document in Ontario is a criminal matter. I looked at Barrett directly for the first time. I've been putting this together for about 3 months. I wanted to make sure I had everything before I said anything. Barrett said nothing. His face had gone a color I didn't have a name for. I closed my folder. I don't want to fight, I said. I want my mother's company. And I'd like Gerald to know exactly what his son has been doing with the access and trust he was given. What happened after that took time, the way these things always do. Barrett's lawyer advised him not to say anything else that day, and he didn't. They left the meeting together and I watched Gerald watch them go, and I saw the exact moment understanding arrived for him, the way it will on a face when something painful becomes undeniable. Not a dramatic break, just a settling, like soil after rain. He sat down. I sat next to him. We didn't talk for a while. The RCMP investigation moved slowly, as investigations do, but it moved. Fortier, the notary in Cambridge, cooperated once it became clear the alternative was significantly worse for him. He confirmed that the document had been brought to him already signed. He had not witnessed the signature in person, which is the entire point of a notary, and that he had been told the other party's presence was not required due to a health situation. He had not verified this. He had notarized it anyway. His license is currently under review. Barrett's numbered company was dissolved. The document was declared fraudulent. My stake in Callaway Fine Interiors was confirmed unambiguously. Barrett was charged with uttering a forged document. I don't know yet what the outcome of those proceedings will be. I know he had to give up the Lexus. I know Priya left him, which she probably should have done long before any of this. Gerald, to his credit, cooperated with everything. He was devastated in a specific way that I recognized. The grief of someone who trusted, and was shown that the trust was wrong, layered on top of grief he was already carrying. I didn't blame him. I don't blame him now. We have dinner together sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. People ask me why I waited. Why I spent 3 months building a file, instead of confronting Barrett the moment I found the unauthorized login, or the moment I found the document. The answer is, because I knew what I was dealing with. I've worked fraud cases. I know what happens when you confront someone early, before you have everything. They cover their tracks, they lawyer up, they get ahead of the story. Depending on the circumstances, they can sometimes muddy the evidence enough that nothing sticks. Barrett had created a paper reality. My job was to build a better paper reality, one that was true. I also knew something else, which I probably wouldn't have known if I hadn't spent 5 years doing this work. The most useful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is let them. He thought I was a grieving, passive, easily managed woman who was still submerged in loss, and probably wouldn't notice what he was doing until it was done. He thought an accountant was someone who worked with spreadsheets. He thought he had time. I have a photograph of my mother on my desk. It's from a trade show in Toronto, 2009. She's standing in front of a display of fabric swatches, laughing at something someone just outside the frame said, and she looks like the most alive person in the room. Which she probably was. I look at it when I have a hard day at work. I looked at it a lot during those 3 months. She didn't build a $4 million business by being passive. She built it by being thorough and patient, and by understanding that the work you do before anyone is watching is what determines the outcome when everyone finally is. I learned that from her. I just happened to also have a CFE designation and a forensic accountant's instinct for following the paper trail. She would have found that very funny.